Thanksgiving had always been a complicated holiday in our family. You'd think after all these years we would have figured out how to gather around a table without drama, but somehow, my sister, Jade, always found a way to stir something up. I had walked into our parents' house that morning with a smile, carrying a pie I had baked from scratch, only to be met with her whisper as she leaned in at the door. "You're not welcome this Thanksgiving." I froze. I looked at her, waiting for her to crack a smile, say she was joking, or maybe explain herself. But nothing. Just a smug look on her face, like she had been waiting all year to say those words. The hallway was already filled with the smells of roasted turkey and spiced apple cider, but all I could taste was bitterness. "Excuse me?" I asked, my voice low so the others inside wouldn't hear. Jade folded her arms and leaned closer. "You've been distant. You skipped Dad's retirement dinner. You didn't show up for Emma's graduation. You're not part of this family anymore, so why act like it today?" I couldn't believe it. I had been working 2 jobs, saving to cover some serious medical bills that no one in this house ever bothered to ask about. I didn't miss those events because I didn't care. I missed them because I was barely holding my own life together. I didn't realize I needed permission to see my own parents, I said coldly. But inside, my hands were shaking. Jade smirked, stepping back just enough to keep her voice from being heard by the others. "Well, don't get too comfortable. You can drop the pie off if you want. But dinner? That's for family." That's when something inside me snapped, not in anger, but in clarity. All this time I had been breaking my back to be there for people who didn't even bother to understand what I was going through. I wasn't just being excluded, I was being erased. I nodded slowly, taking a deep breath. "Okay," I said quietly, "but while you're slicing the turkey tonight, just remember, you don't get to have it both ways." She frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" "You don't get to push me out and still expect that $2,000 loan next month," I said, stepping back. "Yeah. Mom told me you were counting on me to help cover the last of your mortgage payment, but guess what? You can take that off your list." Jade's eyes widened, the color draining from her face. I turned around, pie still in hand, and walked right out the door. She thought she was the one shutting a door that day, but she didn't know. I had keys to every room they all pretended I didn't belong in. As I walked back to my car, pie still warm in my hands, a strange calm settled over me. Not sadness, not anger, just clarity. I had always been the one trying to keep the family together, the one who quietly made sacrifices, skipped meals to make sure I could lend a few hundred here, 1,000 there. And yet, at every turn, I was met with the same pattern, being taken for granted, then being blamed when I set boundaries. I sat behind the wheel, letting the engine hum softly beneath me. I didn't even know where I was going. The idea of sitting alone on Thanksgiving felt heavy, but not as heavy as sitting around that table with people who pretended I didn't matter. My phone buzzed. A message from Mom. "Jade said you left suddenly. Everything okay?" Suddenly? I almost laughed. I was uninvited at the door and now it was sudden? My thumbs hovered over the screen. Part of me wanted to just ignore it, but I knew Mom had no idea what had actually happened. She never did. Jade had a way of controlling the story before anyone else had a chance to speak. So I called. She picked up immediately. "Sweetheart, where did you go?" "Jade said you forgot something and rushed off." I held back a deep sigh. "No, Mom. I didn't forget anything. I was told not to come inside." A pause. "What?" "Jade told me, you're not welcome this Thanksgiving." And no, she wasn't joking. The silence on the other end was sharp. I could almost hear Mom's thoughts scrambling, trying to make sense of what I just said. "That doesn't make sense. Why would she say that?" "Because," I said, my voice steady now, "she doesn't see me as part of this family anymore. And honestly, I'm not surprised. She's been taking more than just space. She's been taking jabs, cutting me off emotionally for months."
"But you know how she gets," Mom said gently. "That same old excuse she'd used our whole lives. She's just stressed. Her mortgage, her work." "Yeah," I interrupted, "her mortgage, which you told me she needed help with." $2,000, remember? Mom went quiet again. I've helped her more times than I can count, covered her credit card debt, paid for her son's school trip, and I never complained. But I'm done being used, Mom. I'm done being everyone's financial safety net and emotional punching bag. I I didn't know she said that to you, Mom said finally, voice barely above a whisper. If I had known. But that's the problem, I said, not angry, just tired. You never know, because you never ask, because you assume everything's fine as long as Jade is smiling and I'm silent. There was nothing left to say for the moment, so I ended the call softly and turned off my phone. I needed space, not from Thanksgiving, but from the people who only valued me when I was giving them something. That evening, I ended up at a little cafe I used to go to in college. A Friendsgiving was happening there. Strangers, laughing, sharing food. One of the staff recognized me, waved me in, and within minutes I was seated with a group of people I didn't even know, but who welcomed me with warmth my own family couldn't offer. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe. As the night rolled on and plates were passed around, I shared pieces of my story. And in return, I heard stories from others who had been cast aside, pushed away, and undervalued. We laughed, we listened, and I realized something. Family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the people who show up when it matters. And while Jade was busy carving turkey, sitting in her comfort, built partly from my silent sacrifices, I was finally feeding a part of myself that had starved for too long: self-worth. The next morning, I woke up to a flood of missed calls and messages. First from my mom, then two from Jade, one from my cousin Emily, even a few from my uncle who rarely ever reached out unless it was a family emergency. I ignored them all, for now. Instead, I sat with my coffee, still thinking about last night, the cafe, the laughter, the unfamiliar but comforting feeling of being seen without judgment. That night gave me something my family never had: space to be myself without feeling like I was always on trial. When I finally opened the messages, most of them said the same thing. Call us. Please talk to us. Let's not make this a bigger issue. Except one. Jade's message, the one that stood out. If you really cared, you wouldn't have walked away. You embarrassed Mom. You made Thanksgiving about you. Again. I sat there reading it over and over, stunned by the boldness. No apology, no accountability, just blame. Typical. I typed and deleted a dozen replies, but then I realized this wasn't worth explaining anymore. I had explained myself for years, justifying my choices, shrinking myself to avoid confrontation, letting the guilt of "you're the older one, be mature" keep me silent. Not anymore. Instead of replying, I called Mom. She picked up after one ring. "Rachel," she breathed into the phone, "are you okay?" "I'm fine," I said calmly, "but I need to talk to you. Really talk." She was quiet, then said, "Okay." I didn't waste time. "Do you remember when Jade borrowed money from me 2 years ago for her emergency dental surgery?" "Yes." "She promised to pay me back in 3 months. She never did. I never pushed it. I helped her again 6 months later when she got laid off. Then again when she moved into her new house. Thousands of dollars, Mom. Quietly, without complaining, without conditions. I didn't know it was that much," Mom murmured, "because I never made a scene, because I thought that's what family does. But this Thanksgiving?" My voice hardened. "She told me at the front door that I wasn't welcome, that I didn't belong." "I don't understand why she would do that," Mom whispered, hurt in her tone. "Because I stopped feeding her ego. Because I stopped showing up when it only served her," I replied. "She's used to being the golden child, Mom, but I'm not going to let her treat me like a stranger and still expect my support." Mom sighed, weary now. "You've always been stronger than her, more independent. Maybe I let her take advantage of that." "You did," I said softly. "But I'm not calling to make you feel bad. I'm calling to tell you this. I'm stepping back. I won't be at."
I'm stepping back, I repeated. Not because I don't love you, Mom, but because I'm tired of being treated like I don't matter unless I'm needed. There was a long pause on her end. I could hear her breathing, like she was trying to hold back tears. I never wanted to make you feel that way, she said, her voice soft and broken. You've always been the reliable one, the one we didn't worry about. And I guess we took that for granted. I nodded, though she couldn't see it. You did, and I allowed it. But that ends now. Another pause. Then, so what happens next? I sipped my now cold coffee and looked out the window. The sky was clear, peaceful. It felt like a sign. What happens next, I said, is that I focus on me for once. I stop bending over backwards to keep relationships that only stand if I do all the holding. Mom didn't argue. She didn't try to stop me. Maybe for the first time, she really heard me, really saw me. I hope you and Jade work things out, I added. But if she wants anything from me, respect, help, money, it'll have to come after an apology, a real one. I understand, Mom said, barely above a whisper. And I'm sorry too. I ended the call not with anger, but with relief. For once, I hadn't folded, I hadn't swallowed my truth to keep the peace. And just like that, the weight I'd been carrying for years, the unspoken resentments, the forced obligations, the ache of being sidelined while others were celebrated, started to lift. Slowly, but noticeably. That weekend, I booked a short getaway. A solo trip upstate to a cozy cabin I'd been eyeing for years, but never dared to spend money on just for me. I brought books, music, and silence, and in that silence, I began to heal. I realized something important. Being excluded from a toxic space isn't a punishment. It's a gift. Jade might have slammed a door in my face, but what she didn't know was I was already building something better on the other side. A life where I chose who sat at my table. A life where giving didn't mean losing myself. And next Thanksgiving? Well, I'll be the one deciding who's welcome at mine.
I won't be at birthdays, holidays, or family events where I'm tolerated, not respected, I said firmly. I'm done being the backup plan, the emergency fund, the emotional dumping ground. There was silence on the other end. Then Mom spoke, slowly, like her words were being carefully chosen. I hear you, and I don't blame you. I just wish I had paid more attention before it got to this point. I exhaled, quietly. That was something. It wasn't everything, but it was something. Later that week, I got another message. This time, not from Jade, but from her husband. He apologized, said he hadn't known the full story, that he always thought I was the rich, distant sister who didn't care. Funny how that narrative had followed me for years, and it was Jade who shaped it. But now, the truth was starting to surface. Slowly, and I didn't need to push anymore. I just needed to protect my peace. The next Thanksgiving, I didn't go to my parents' house. I hosted my own, small, cozy, full of real laughter, not forced smiles. Just 3 friends and my neighbor's college-age son who couldn't fly home. It was quiet, warm, and full of honesty. No gossip, no guilt, no one whispering, "You're not welcome." Just people who saw me, appreciated me. I didn't need to make a dramatic speech to take back my worth. I had already done that, by walking away from people who thought they could buy my silence with guilt and family titles. And the best part? I wasn't bitter. I was free. Weeks passed. The dust settled. There were no more guilt texts, no fake apologies. Just silence. And for the first time in years, I welcomed it. I used to think silence meant isolation, that if I wasn't sitting at the family table, I was missing something. But now I realized it wasn't the table that mattered, it was who sat around it. And I no longer needed to be around people who only valued me for what I could give, not who I was. I started spending more time on things that made me feel whole, reading, walking, building my small baking business on the side. What started as a way to de-stress turned into something bigger. I started getting orders, making deliveries, and meeting people who appreciated me without expecting anything extra. And one day, out of nowhere, I got a handwritten letter in the mail. From Mom. She didn't ask me to come back. She didn't beg for things to go back to the way they were. She just wrote, "I finally understand. I should have protected you, not just expected from you. I'm sorry for staying quiet when you were being pushed out. You deserved better. I hope one day you'll let us show you that." I read that line 5 times. It didn't fix everything, but it didn't have to, because this time, the apology wasn't to shut me up. It was to acknowledge me. That night I lit a candle, sat by my window, and looked at the sky. Peaceful, wide, and open. Just like my heart finally felt. This wasn't revenge. This was rebirth. I wasn't the bitter sister anymore. I was the woman who remembered her worth and walked away and never looked back.